This video is brought to you by Ground News. While the UK has now left the European Union, it seems that not everyone thinks we've done a great job of it. In a poll conducted by YouGov last year, more than 50% of respondents claim that the negatives of Brexit have outweighed the positive, whereas only 17% said the inverse. The thing is, irrespective of what the public thinks of how Brexit's been managed, there's little chance of the UK rejoining the EU, or any of its main institutions, anytime soon. The Labour Party, in the run-up to the general election last year, promised that there would be no return to the EU, and added that there would be no return to the single market, the customs union, or freedom of movement. However, there might just be a way for them to sneakily get around this commitment. It was suggested last week that the Labour government could actually potentially get around this by joining something called the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean, or PEM Convention. While this is a customs scheme, it's not the EU's customs union, and therefore it doesn't technically cross the Labour government's red lines. Or at least that's what the Prime Minister's spokesperson has effectively argued. So with this in mind, in this video we're going to have a look at exactly what the PEM Convention actually is, whether it would benefit British businesses, and whether the Labour government will actually join it. If you want more UK political drama from us, then check out our podcast Starmageddon, where we track the successes and failures of this new Labour government. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. Now, to understand why Labour might want to join the PEM Convention, we need to have a look at what it does. Essentially, being part of it means that any products in that country that have obtained originating status, i.e. deemed to have originated within the Convention's membership, can be added to items from other countries in the Convention without the original product losing its originating status. This is important because usually in free trade agreements, certain items with originating status are given preferential treatment, which basically means lower tariffs. By widening the scope of what qualifies as originating, the PEM Convention will essentially help to lower tariffs overall. Now, this is really very useful for manufacturing, as if you use products from other countries to manufacture a new one, under the Convention you can still sell them abroad to other members of the Convention without them breaking any rules of origin stipulations, including selling them to the EU, as it too is part of the Convention. In technical terms, this is referred to as diagonal cumulation, and it's one of the main advantages of the PEM Convention. Right now, there are 25 contracting parties to the PEM Convention. These are Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine, the Faroe Islands, the EU, the EFTA, members of the Barcelona process, including Palestine, and the participants in the EU Stabilisation and Association process, including Kosovo. In total, this means there are 52 countries that are part of the scheme. Now, importantly for the UK, diagonal cumulation was not a part of the UK's trade agreement with the EU. So, if the UK was to join the PEM Convention, then UK manufacturers could export more of their products to the EU tariff-free. As we alluded to in the introduction, it would be somewhat politically tricky for Labour to commit to joining the convention though. Starmer and the Labour government have been keen to demonstrate that they respect the outcome of the referendum and would not seek to undermine the result, even to the point that they have rejected an EU youth mobility scheme on the basis that it would be too close to a return to free movement. It's hard to see how they'd reject a youth mobility scheme on these grounds but accept the PEM Convention. The media would claim that the Labour government had broken one of their Brexit red lines, and that the new government couldn't be trusted not to drag the UK slowly back into the EU. However, just because it could be tricky doesn't mean that Labour categorically won't join. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is in something of a tricky position at the moment. She presided over a huge spike in gilt yields, a 17-year high, and despite all of her promises of getting the British economy growing again, it seems like nothing's really working. Some journalists have suggested that Reeves is now impatient, and that there's now a restlessness for growth among Treasury staffers. As such, perhaps we're getting to the point that the Labour government will seriously consider joining the PEM Convention for the sake of the economy, despite the political repercussions for doing so. With this in mind, it's worth moving on and having a look at exactly how beneficial the PEM Convention could be to the British economy. As we explained earlier, the big advantage comes to businesses that need to source parts from other countries. However, exactly how much this would help is contested. On the one hand, you have William Bain, the head of the British Chamber of Commerce, arguing that his organisation supports joining the PEM Convention, as his research indicates it would have majority support among UK businesses who trade in the European region. Explaining why, he added that joining would reduce paperwork and costs for many UK firms, as it would align rules and regulations on both sides in relation to the sourcing of components and raw materials used in exports. Put simply, joining would benefit British businesses, strengthen supply chains, and enhance trade competitiveness by reducing current trade frictions. Additionally, joining the PEM Convention would be a good way to reset relations with the EU, without actually having to do all that much. All in all, it isn't the largest step, but it would send a clear message to European leaders that the new Labour government, in a break from the previous Tory government, is keen to work more closely with them. However, on the other side of things, the Centre for Inclusive Trade Policy, or CITP, found that only between 1.1% and 2.8% of UK-made products contained ingredients from PEM countries, suggesting that if the UK were to join the convention, it wouldn't actually affect that many UK exports. It's for this reason that the CITP have argued that joining would not be a game changer. Perhaps then, for such a small benefit overall, it simply isn't worth the political capital to join after all. Right now, it just isn't all that clear which way the Labour government will go. While the Labour government have been clear that joining the PEM Convention would not be considered a breach of their Brexit red lines, and Chancellor Rachel Reeves has said she was happy to look at the prospect of the UK joining the scheme, there are, as yet, no plans to actually join. Even the mere suggestion that Reeves is looking at the scheme has elicited opposition on the right of UK politics, meaning that if she does decide to join, she's going to have an almighty fight on her hands. Now, if you want to keep following this and find out what Labour want to do next, you can follow the story over on Ground News, a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. They pull in stories from all over the world and organise them by story, and every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality and ownership of all the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. Right away, you can see this story about Trump and Starmer's burgeoning relationship had 57 outlets reporting on it, with 32% of those sources leaning left and 56% leaning right. With outlets on the right much more likely to additionally make claims that Brits support Trump's policies in areas like deportation and free speech. You can also swipe through some of the headlines to see just how different some of the reporting can be based on these biases. One of my favourite features of theirs is My News Bias. It's basically a fitness tracker, but for news. It tracks my reading habits over time, my trends in political bias, the specific news outlets I read the most, even the specific topics I gravitate towards. It's been really helpful in minimising my personal blind spots. Now, as an impartial news outlet, we're passionate about informing our viewers about bias and helping them to understand how it affects the media they consume. Ground News is very effective at this, showing you exactly how each side of the political divide covers each story you see online. And best of all, we're currently offering viewers 40% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to all of their amazing features like their blind spot feed. So go to ground.news/TLDR, click the QR code here on screen, or use the link in the description to subscribe today.